All right. Hey, Aaron, thanks for calling in from Atlanta, Georgia. How are you doing over there?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Jerry.
Awesome. I didn't tell you this while we were, chit chatting to get ready. I used to be in the Army many, many, many years ago, and I was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, before I got out. So made a few trips to Atlanta.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
very familiar. I've made my way down to Columbus as well.
Oh
So
man, yeah, interesting town that Columbus.
very diplomatic way to put it.
Yes, and then its neighbor across the river, Phoenix City. I
Yeah.
think is the only town where an active duty general declared martial law.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. Bar fights were involved, but it's like they were so bad that the general at the time was like, "All right, that's it. We're gonna go police this town because nobody else is." So that's their claim to fame over there at Phoenix City. But anyway, that's not important. That's not why we have you on. We have you on because one. I just thought it'd be great. The topic that you have to cover would be a great way to get the head spinning of all my Christian male friends who are in specifically the space of marriage and marriage conversations. No, that's not really the reason why. It was you have a website called prenups.com. You're a lawyer. You work and practice in the Atlanta area. And I remember when it was first pitched to me, the idea of let's have a discussion about prenuptial agreements. And I was like, not really the thing that my website and platform's about. But then we got to talking, and I was like, you know what? Actually, that makes sense because that's the conversation that needs to happen. So, I guess tell us about prenups in general because they do have a bad rap. They do have that idea of like we plan to get divorced, but your approach to it is not that at all. So give us a little quick overview about what prenuptial agreements are, and then that unique approach to how we could use them and leverage them when it comes to going into a marriage.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Jerry, you said it, prenuptial agreements, they certainly have a bad rap. And a lot of times they've been used, a lot of times they've deserved that bad rap. They've been used in the kinds of situations where, today you say the term prenuptial agreement and what comes to mind? Probably some old man, yeah, marrying a younger woman, a gold digger, and he wants to protect all his money, away from this wife that certainly he's going to leave after a few years, and that kind of imagery, pervades, and I think it's kind of disrupted the conversation. But a prenuptial agreement at its heart is really just a set of rules as to what's going to happen with your finances, both during the marriage and yes, after the marriage if it ends. And I think a lot of people look at it only as, the plan for divorce. You get married and you're already planning your divorce from day one and you
Yeah.
sign this prenuptial agreement, and that's all people take from it. And a prenuptial agreement can and should be so much more. It really should be laying out an outline of what your understanding is going to be with your spouse about your finances during the marriage itself. So hopefully you never need to get divorced. You never need to, enforce the what happens if we get divorced provision. And so that's kind of the approach that we try to take with our prenuptial agreements is what are the kinds of things that we can put in a document that will prevent a lot of the money fights, the money arguments that degrade the quality of people's marriages.
Yeah. Because I believe the number one topic of marriage arguments is money as well.
That's absolutely right. It's the number one thing that people bring up. Unfortunately, in divorce cases, and even for married couples, it's the number one source of tension in people's households.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's any one topic my wife and I do passionately discuss or avoid, it is the topic of money in our marriage. And it's a shame that we don't have those healthier conversations around that because, I mean, it's the vehicle that allows us to do the traveling we want to do or support the children in the way we want to support them or, all those things. And so, why can't we and why shouldn't we and why not, I guess is the better way to say, why not have those conversations, especially on the front end. Similarly, I know some pastors who do, premarital counseling. And one of the things that they're really big on is, where are you with your finances? Are you going into debt? Are you already in debt? How are you going to support yourselves as you go into this? They may not go as granular as like who's responsible for what or anything like that, but they do go into at least, you know, what is the state of the money here going in, and what is the plan to sustain this marriage financially? And those are very important conversations already happening. When we throw that phrase in there, prenuptial agreement, it's like, whoa, hey, wait a second, no, we don't need that. It's the holy union under God, and it's like, yes, it is, and we're people, and we're not God. So, what are some of the things that do get discussed? You mentioned, the kind of things that go into like the responsibility areas. I guess what are some of the typical things that go into those agreements? Because I'm sure they're not cookie cutter, but I mean, there's probably some common themes with an agreement. Like, what are some of those themes, I guess, that come up?
Yeah. I mean, the way that I like to approach it is kind of in three stages. You've got kind of before the marriage, you've got during the marriage, and then you've got your contingency plans on the back end. And so the first thing that we try to address is where's everybody coming into the marriage? What do you have? What's the state of your finances? How much debt do you have? How much of an income do you have? And just like you say, people are scared to have these tough conversations because it's not only is it taboo. Obviously, we don't talk about our personal finances. It's considered rude, in public to talk about how much money you have in your bank account. And also there's a lot of shame, I find, connected to people's finances. You may be embarrassed if you've got more credit card debt than you wish you had, or your student loan balance is a little high, or maybe you haven't saved as much as you wish you had. And especially with today's couples, they get married closer to 30 on average than they do, closer to 20, like our parents' generation did. And so back then they were starting pretty much from scratch. Now people are getting married at 30. You're expected to have a 401k. Maybe you've got a mortgage on a house, and some money in the savings account. So, a little known fact, for your agreement to be enforceable, for a prenuptial agreement to be enforceable, you have to disclose everything about your finances to your spouse, all of your assets, all of your debts. We literally write it all down on paper. And I find that that's such an important part of starting your marriage off with this default of transparency. Everything's on the table, nothing's hidden. That applies to other areas of the marriage besides the finances, obviously. And then we go into during the marriage itself, that's stage two. Are you going to put everything in one bank account and only one spouse has access to it, and only one spouse knows what's going on with the money and the other spouse just kind of has to trust it? Or are you going to have, kind of a mix of joint bank accounts where the joint expenses are paid from, but each spouse has their own bank account with their own kind of fun money in it? That's something that I find works well. Is all the income going to go into one account and then everybody gets their fun money out of there? Or is the money going to go into separate accounts and then you're both going to contribute to a joint account from which you pay your joint expenses? And so I like to give kind of different options of, the kinds of marital account systems that work.
Yeah, that sounds pretty darn smart, actually. I'm just like, why not? I think I'm thinking like even married couples right now, like, I mean, probably too late to go get a prenuptial agreement now, but you could still have those dialogues, that conversation around, how do we want to manage this money so that we both have a sense of freedom, but we're also being responsible adults. Because it's not the type of thing that they put in the romance movies, like,
it's not.
Yeah, this conversation wasn't in the Notebook.
The spreadsheet is a romance killer.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, hey, let's talk about Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps here. It's like, okay. And then the music comes on. You're like, oh wow, this is getting interesting. No, I'm kidding. So that is huge, though. It's just. And I can think of some other financial advisors. They talk about having this kind of conversation, and that transparency is very important. I know, again, just being transparent on my own, I don't think I told my wife about $39,000 in student loan debt until I think 2 years into our marriage, when the notices started to show up at our door and we owed like $700 a month. And she's like, what is this? We have 2 kids we need to feed. We don't make a whole lot to begin with. So why? What what's happening here? And so we had to have a conversation around that. Like, oh, okay, I brought this in, surprise.
Right.
And she was not happy. And it downright scared her. And so, yeah, that one little thing that I hid eroded some trust, and so, again, being transparent up front. I mean, here in a prenup, you're putting it formally in a documented agreement.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there's no perfect time to have that conversation, right? There's no time where it just naturally comes up that you've got, the 39 grand of student loan or
Yeah.
credit card debt. And I find that the prenuptial process, whether you actually even sign the agreement or not, just going through the process forces that conversation that a lot of people, in retrospect say, gosh, it would have been better just to go ahead and discuss that on the front end. Same thing with the bank account setup. I think a lot of us just usually follow what we saw our parents do, which is, one spouse handles the finances and that's kind of it. And in today's world, it's easy for both people to have logins, to the same bank account, and the money can go in there, and it really only takes a few hours to sit down and say, okay, what are all of our truly joint expenses? Let's let those come from the joint bank account. And then maybe each of us gets our own, kind of spending money every month, and that can vary. For some couples, that's, maybe $150. For some, it's $500. For some, it's $1,000 a month. And each spouse gets their own money and they can spend it however they want. I know in my household, my wife may go out to eat more than me, and I'm a brown bag guy. So, to me, the lunch out seems like a waste of money. And for me, I got to get the new phone every year. And for my wife, so the last phone was working just fine. Why are you upgrading to the next phone? But that's my treat for myself.
Yeah.
And our expenses may seem like a waste to each other, but because we have our own money in our own bank accounts, neither of us gets to say how the other one spends their fun money. And there's no arguments about it because I literally can't see what she spends her money on. She can't see what I'm spending on mine, but because we both have the same amounts, there's no arguments. And both of us are living in the same household in the same socioeconomic class. If one person controls all the money and they're the only one with the access to it, I can tell you, from experience and in the work that I do, that two spouses living in completely different socioeconomic worlds, that's a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. I used to do work with a battered women's shelter, and that financial control was one of the things that came up in a lot of the presentations we did and the cases we would hear about. So yeah, having that equal footing is huge. I even remember going to a Christian marriage conference and got to sit down with the speakers because we were like the volunteer directors. So it was like we had access to the presenters. And the thing that really surprised us was having dinner with this couple. And there were other couples there, but we were paying attention to this couple because they're kind of mentoring us in this weekend. And the way the two of them spoke about money was, the husband was like handing money to the wife, like, "Hey, thanks for letting me borrow $30 earlier. Here's me paying you back from my stash, and thanks for your patience. I love you." And we're looking at these two like, you two were just on the stage talking about oneness in marriage, or you're drifting apart. You got two different accounts and you borrowed $30 from your wife. What? I don't understand. But we didn't ask the question, like why and how and what. And it turns out, and we later learned, but I mean, you just now described it, was they had separate fun money accounts or blow money accounts. And so he really did borrow $30 from her blow money, which she gladly loaned him. But she was also expecting it back. Like, hey, remember, I loaned you $30 there. And it looks like you just got 30 or $40 from this guy paying you back for something else. So, and so he paid her back, and they were happy about it. And they've been married, I think, at that time, 30 to 35 years. So they've been doing that practice for a while. And I think, I'm sorry.
And it's working for them, sounds like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're still married, and we're still in touch with them. And they're still out there on the speaker circuit talking about healthy marriage. But I think that is one of those valuable lessons that, I mean, it definitely doesn't get talked about on stage, but we got to see it at dinner with them. And I'm just kind of thinking, man, that's a great idea. because it does prevent you from overspending so that the bills are now being hurt. It also prevents either one of them from having to say, okay, I guess I can't get my toy this week because you're getting your toy this week. And that could build some animosity.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It has to be a choice between either or, husband or wife rather than both. And you can save up, without fear that the other spouse is spending away the money you're saving up for your treat. So
Yeah. Nice. Now, you'd mentioned before we got on the call that you had your own personal why of why, prenups should be approached in this way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I started, I've been practicing law for almost 20 years now, and about 14 to 15 years of that time has been spent in family law. And so, every day I'm working with, divorce, custody, child support. And I wasn't married when I started doing this work. And I watched, couples have the exact same arguments over and over, at the end of these broken down marriages. And it just struck me that it was a real shame that these very preventable, avoidable arguments I kept seeing happening over and over with these couples. And it really would not have taken that much work if they had sat down on the front end and understood, one, that the law treats all of your money as one big pile. It's, it doesn't matter whose name's on the bank account. If it comes in during the marriage, it's marital money. And so it doesn't make sense to, hide these things from your spouse in the first place. But also, just some of these systems that I recommend that we've been talking about, if couples had access to this information on the front of their marriage, maybe a lot of these couples wouldn't be getting divorced. And, I wanted to apply this, to my own relationship. And so I've only been married 5 years. I got married a little bit later in life. And when my wife and I got together, I decided there's no way that I'm going to go down the path of some of the clients that I've seen. And I'm going to use all the lessons that I've learned from the decade that I've been doing this kind of law to, sit down with my future wife at the time and say, okay, let's come to agreement on all of these. How are we going to handle our finances, and how are we going to avoid these types of arguments? And started putting it down in writing. And, for me, it was, I'm going to draft the prenuptial agreement that is going to help me and my wife stay married. And I know that probably sounds crazy to the average person hearing, the term prenuptial agreement and thinking, wait a minute, stay married? That's not the purpose of an agreement. But it really can be, and so we sat down and decided, or not only are we going to be transparent at the beginning, but we're going to make that our habit throughout our relationship. And we wrote other things into our agreement that we thought would promote a healthy relationship for us. So, for example, we have a rule where we have to sit down every December, and we'll talk about what our retirement contribution is going to be for the upcoming year. We love travel as well as you do. And so, where are the places we want to go? How much money do we need to set aside for that? We included a rule in our agreement that we've got to discuss any expenditure over $500 with the other spouse before we make it. For some people, that may be $100. For some people who've got it good, it may be $1,000. But having some kind of rule where you just got to check in and say, all right, this is a purchase I'm thinking about making. It's coming out of the joint account. Is this okay with you? Because it's that surprise, expense that causes problems. We included things like counseling. Either spouse can trigger three counseling sessions at any time. And the other one has to agree to it, so that, we kind of, I think, a lot of people say the biggest cause of divorce is money, or they'll say it's cheating. And I say it's communication. And so if there's a breakdown in the communication between the couple, that's when these other things start becoming, the smaller problems start becoming larger problems. And so forcing you to be able to have to sit down and say, okay, let's go get a third party involved and sit down and talk these things through. And really, the sky's the limit. I mean, you're only limited by your creativity in terms of what are the trigger points for you, and what are the agreements you can come to with your spouse on the front end to prevent arguments from getting out of hand.
Yeah. That is brilliant that that is built in there. The part about seeing counseling, if the other person triggers it and says, "Hey, we need to go talk to a counselor." Uh, Again, going back to that phrase, if you're not growing closer together, you are drifting apart. Like one of those two motions is happening, and having that tool agreed upon that you can go to a counselor, I think is huge, or a financial advisor, whatever it is, that is huge. Do that course correction before it becomes a huge, divorce conversation or yeah, pretty much that.
And in fact, you mentioned financial advisors. We've done that in agreements as well, where both parties have to be invited to, any kind of meetings with the financial advisor, or, anybody can request, and the other party, if one person is kind of handling the finances, which happens in a lot of marriages, that the books have to be opened at any given time. We've even put it in, and they're found enforceable by courts, where you can say, all right, before anybody can even be allowed to file for divorce, you've got to do at least 6 counseling sessions.
Yeah.
You got to sit down and at least try to do a mediation, like give an opportunity for cooler heads to prevail, to try to save the marriage before you're even allowed to go down that road of divorce. So there's certainly a lot of tools that you can use as part of, again, the prenuptial agreement, to try to help promote, your healthy marriage.
Yeah. Now, do you find when, that part of the agreement, so going to get marriage counseling 6 times before dissolving the marriage, like, does that work when it's already in the prenuptial agreement compared to couples who don't do it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a good way to track down all, everyone that I've worked with, but my guess is, I think there's a lot of value in putting some things down in writing and having some intention at the beginning of the marriage, and making it kind of official, making it a little bit formal, that sticks with couples, that you remember, these are the agreements that we made at the beginning of the marriage. And because you actually put it in writing, whether you did it on your own or whether you got an attorney like myself to do it, you put it down in writing, makes it a little bit more real. And that just kind of becomes the standard. I mean, I don't think that these couples are, I know with me and my wife, we're certainly not bringing out the prenuptial agreement every other week and, beating the other one over the head with it. But we know that we have an agreement that, if counseling is necessary, then that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. That was what I was wondering, is how often does that agreement come out and referenced when, things are, getting heated, or that you think things are drifting away from what you agreed on?
Yeah, I tell couples that I hope that they sign this agreement and they put it in a drawer and they never have to break it out again. But starting off the marriage by having that conversation, agreeing, okay, we're going to be transparent, with each other about the finances. We're going to have an equal household in terms of the finances. One person's not going to be hoarding all of the money while the other one is cut off. We're going to, sit down periodically and have conversations. Do we sit down on the same day every year and have this conversation? Have we probably missed sometimes? Sure. But, there's an understanding that there's an open book and that it's going to be an even playing field. And yes, we do have what I call the contingency clauses, if things do not work out. And I say contingency clauses is I don't just mean divorce. When we talk about how much life insurance do we need to have for the other person, so that if, the unexpected happens, the worst comes to worst, that, the family is going to be protected from a financial aspect. But yes, we've locked in that everything would be 50-50 if worst comes to worst, so that we don't do what I see a lot of couples do in my day-to-day job, which is, spend half of the marital money fighting over who's going to get, what's left. And it's just, to me, it's just heartbreaking to see couples do that, if they make these decisions and lock themselves in when they're in love and when, they respect one another, they take away their ability to try to cheat the other one out of what they built together, if the worst comes to worst, if things do go south. And I think that's an important thing to, have couples commit to doing. Again, we do fair prenups. We don't do the, at my office, we don't do the, I'm trying to keep the other one from getting their hands on anything. And I think that also sets the right tone for couples at the beginning of their marriages as well.
Yeah. I don't know why, but the movie, was it Tommy Boy? Just popped into my head. It's not that. That's not what we're talking about. I don't even think there was a prenup in that movie.
It's a great movie, though.
Yeah, it is. Okay, before my mind totally goes off the path there. So if folks want to reach out and get more information on this, especially if they're in the Georgia area, and I guess more specifically because of mileage and all that in the Atlanta, Georgia area, where's a good place for them to come and get more information from, say, an Aaron Thomas, attorney at law kind of guy?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main practice is at aaronthomaslaw.com, and we do practice in Georgia. We do get down to Macon and Columbus, as a matter of fact. The other website, prenups.com, we are currently offering prenuptial agreements in 3 states. We've got staff that are barred in Virginia and New York, as well as Georgia, and we're trying to add more states and kind of take this message nationwide. We're trying to rebrand the prenuptial agreement from something that is a plan for divorce to something that's a plan for marriage, and a tool that couples can use to set their relationship on the right course from the very beginning, and avoid needing the services of my other family law practice.
Yeah, we want to avoid that.
I'd love, for it to become the norm for couples to have this conversation again, whether you ever get a prenuptial agreement or not. I'd love to put the divorce firm out of business. I'd love for couples to, kind of learn the tactics and put in place rules from the beginning that create some guardrails for their relationship. That's what we're doing. If you want to go to prenups.com and check us out, we've got a free ebook on there that doesn't talk about divorce at all. It's called 7 Financial Strategies for a Rock Solid Marriage. And I talk about a lot of the tactics of setting up your accounts the right ways, and appointing a CFO, and the full transparency that we've been talking about today, Jerry. And invite everyone to go there. It's a free download, and check it out. You don't have to be getting married to benefit from it. Us married couples, people who've been married 1 year or 20 years, I hope can get something from it.
Yeah, I am 100% glad that one, I didn't just blanketly say no when I got the email from Amir. So you have to tell him thank you, and that I said thank you. Actually, I can email him and tell him thank you, because reading that whole message and then seeing that there is this unique approach to it and this unique perspective on it. I mean, we just talked about it. That you're making transparency a reality before the vows are taken. You're creating a plan that's built on the idea and the value of transparency while they're married. And then it's like, okay, now just in case you do, we're people and you do people things, and the marriage winds up going down that road of divorce, there is a backup plan that you agree this is how you're going to fight. Yeah, and it's like you're pre-establishing those, or you're establishing those rules up front. We're going to go this route. There's no question about it. Here we go. And I think that's brilliant. And then the way we just talked about it was, it's not even for pre-married couples. It's, I picked up nuggets that, my wife and I can apply as soon as we maybe not right after we hang up, but, there's some things that we can apply to help improve our own financial situation. And, just keep building that life we always dreamed of having together. So I think there's some value there as well. So everybody, check out prenups.com if you are in the Georgia area. And what were the other 2 states? Virginia and
New York.
And New York. Check out aaronthomaslaw.com as well. Where's it the other way around? Either way.
Yeah, just come check out both.
Yeah.
sites. The prenups are across the 3 states: Georgia, Virginia, and New York. Aaron Thomas Law is just in Georgia for now, but yeah, if you're in another state and you're interested in the prenup, shoot me a message. We're adding new states all the time, and I love having the conversations, even if I can't, officially represent you.
And then at prenups.com, get that free ebook, 7 Strategies. Whether you've been married a year, you're about to get married, you've been married 20 years, go get that book. Aaron, are there any like final words of wisdom that you want to leave folks before we sign off?
Yeah, it's just, keep talking. And like I said, it's the communication. I know that it may be weird getting marriage advice from somebody who's known as a divorce attorney, but I'm wishing success, on everyone, and continued communication for your relationships.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron, so much. It was great having you on. And it does make sense, though, because you see it at its worst. So you have an idea of what to do to prevent it from getting there in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on, Jerry. This has been great.